Welcome back to the video. Let's go ahead and get started with our lesson. We have lesson 75, factoring trinomials. Make sure you've seen the video before where we factored ax squared plus bx plus c. I don't remember what lesson that is. I'll put it down in Dropbox so you can look back at it. If you're not doing these every day, you're going to miss a concept. In this case, this is in continuation of what we learned about factoring. Make sure you've done that before you've done this, or else this will be very, very hard. Let's go ahead and get started. Here, we're factoring in place of the ax squared plus bx plus c. This one's different because of the fact that the number in front of x squared is greater than 1. If it's greater than 1, so you have 2x squared, etc., etc. We have 7x squared, etc., etc. In that case, we have to factor a different way. We can't factor the normal way of finding factors of c that equal b. We can't do that. Here, we can do this. We use these steps. The book teaches you trial and error. I feel like this way is the easiest way. You can go to Khan Academy of factoring with leading coefficients greater than 1, and this can also help you out. But here, the first thing we do, you multiply your first number and your last number. So your a and your c together. Second, you find factors that equal your b. So it's similar, but you have to multiply first, a and c, find factors of a and c that equal b. And then you're going to bring your first term down, you're going to bring your third term down, and the two factors that you've had, those will be your two middle terms. And in 4, you factor out the common factor. For step 4, if you don't see it, if there's nothing that you can factor out, that means you did something wrong, and you have to go back. Now let's go ahead and start on this. Here, example 1, we have 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. 2 greater than 1. Step 1, you multiply your a and c term together. When you multiply 2 times positive 5, you get 10. Second step, you find factors of 10 that equal your b. Your b in this case is positive 7. Keep in mind, put the sign in front so you know what you're looking for. Factors of 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, negative 1 and negative 10, negative 2 and negative 5. But here we're just trying to do it quick. Factors of that would be 2 and 5, and positive 2 and 5. 2 plus 5 now equals 7. Find factors of a times c, which is 10, that equal your b term, which is 7. 2 plus 5 equals 7. 2 times 5 equals 10. Your third step, you're going to bring down your first term. You're going to bring down your last term, or your third term. You have 2x squared plus 5 here. This is where it's slightly different. This is where people get lost. Here you bring down your first, you bring down your last. The two terms that you find here is what you're going to include here. So here it says plus 5 plus blank x plus blank x. Those two numbers of factors, those will be your factors. So now I have 2 and positive 5. I'm going to put the 2 here, the 5, 2. You can also interchange it if it makes more sense, because from this step, you bring down your first, you bring down your second. Your factors will be your two middle terms with the x included. Include that x. And then you're going to factor out common factor. How you do that is you factor the first 2, and then you factor the second 2. So that's the third step. Bring down the first. You're going to have there 4. Factor out the common factor, and you're going to factor. So the first two terms, we have 2x squared plus 2x. The common factor is 2x. And when I factor the common factor out just from the first 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. X squared divided by x, or 2 minus 1, I'm left with an x. And then here, plus 2x divided by 2x, we have x plus 1. Then you look at your last 2. So there will always be 2 groups. The first 2, the second 2. You're not going to interchange them. It's always the first 2. It's always the second 2. Now here, 5x plus 5, you can factor out a 5. Always include the sign with it. Don't put just 5. Put plus 5 or negative 5. So now we're factoring out the 5. We get x plus 1. I didn't put fifth step, but the fifth step would be factor again. With my horrible handwriting. Factor again. If you look here, this is the first term, this is the second term. They will have a binomial in common. That binomial is x plus 1. There should always be a binomial that they both have in common. If they don't, you did something wrong, and you go back and see what you messed up from your factoring here. Now, we factor out x plus 1, and what's left is 2x and a positive 5, and that's your answer. So they have in the book 2x plus 5 times x plus 1. Doesn't matter which way you put it, as long as you have the same numbers and the same signs between the parentheses. Example 2, we have 6x squared minus 11x plus 3. You multiply a and c, that is 18. Find factors of a and c that equal b. b in this case is negative 11. So now you're finding factors of 18 that equal negative 11, and just to keep in the sake of time, negative 9 and negative 2. That's your second step. Find factors that equal b. Third step, bring down your first term, 6x squared. Bring down your third term, plus 3. And then you have your two middle terms. In this case here, you could do it one of two ways. You could put the 9 here, you could put the 2 here. But I always want to keep in mind I'm always going to be factoring the first 2 and the second 2. There should always be, most of the time there should be something factoring. So for here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the 2 here. It's a negative 2. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to put the negative 9 on the right side. And now I have my two middle factors. So for the two factors, they can interchange. I will try to find a way where they will factor a lot easier. And now we move on to the fourth step, which is factoring out the common factor. 6x squared minus 2x. You can factor out a 2 and an x. You end up with 3x minus 1. Now, the second two, 9x plus 3, you're going to factor out a common factor. Keep in mind, when your first term is a negative, you have to factor that negative out. So I'll have a negative, and from these two terms, I can factor out a 3. I can't factor out an x because the second term doesn't have an x. So looking at negative 9x plus 3, I can factor out negative 3. Negative 9 divided by negative 3, I get 3x plus 1. Oh, sorry, minus 1. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1. Now, from this step, we factor again. There should always be a binomial in common, and they do. Factor out that binomial, and then you're left with a 2x minus 3, and that's your answer. Go on to the third one. 4x squared plus 4x minus 3. Multiply those out. You get negative 12. Find factors that equal positive 4. And when you do that, I just want to make sure I do it correctly. Negative 2 and 6. After that, bring your first term down, your last term down. 4x squared minus 3. Then you have your two middle terms. In this case, your two middle terms will be negative 2x plus 6x. So it's not just 6, it's 6x. Keep in mind, put the sign in front as well. Then you factor the first 2, factor the second 2. And then you have 2x with x minus 1 on one side. Here you can factor out a 3. Always put a sign in front of there. So I put a plus sign. So 3, and I have 2x minus 1. And this step over here, there's always a binomial that they have in common. This is the first term, second term. I forgot to put the 2 here. 2x. We factor out the 2x minus 1, and we are left with 2x plus 3. Keep on going. B, 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. Factor out the first and last term. You get negative 12. Find factors of that. They equal negative 11. And I believe that's negative 12 and 1. Factor down the first term, the last term. So 3x squared minus 4. You have your two middle terms from your two factors here. I'm going to put negative 12x here plus 1x here. So I'll just put the 1 there to help you out. Okay. Keep on going. Factor the first 2, factor the second 2. So here, 3x squared minus 12. I can factor out a 3x. I'm left with x minus 4. Here, there is nothing to factor out, so I'm just leaving it as x minus 4. Now we can factor out the binomial. We have 3x plus, there's nothing there, but it's always a 1. One more. Actually, we can do 2 more. So now, again, it's a pattern. It's going over and over, doing the exact same steps over and over again. Example 4. Sorry, I cut off for a bit there. We're going to go to example 4. We have 2x squared minus 11xy plus 5y squared. Now we have two variables, x and y. Same thing though. Multiply your first and your last one, but now we're going to include all the variables in it. So it's going to be 2x squared times 5y squared, and you get 10x squared y squared. You find factors of 10x squared y squared that equal your b term. So we're going to include everything for this step because now we're dealing with two variables and we're not just dealing with x. Here, find factors of a times c that equal b, which is negative 10, just kidding, negative 11xy. Factors of this to equal negative 11xy is negative 10xy and negative xy. Remember what I said from the previous video, if you have, for example, the x squared, if you have two variables, you're going to split it evenly in half. So if you have 4, y to the 4th power, you're going to split it evenly in half. So you're going to have y squared here, y squared here. In this case, we have x squared, y squared. We're going to split it evenly in half. So x on this side, same thing with the y. Split the y in half, so then we'll end up with xy in each one. Find factors of this to equal negative 11, and that's by two factors. Next step, you bring down your first term, bring down your last term. I'm going to put it over here. We have 2x squared minus 10xy minus xy plus 5y squared. You factor out your first two and your last two. So first two, your last two, always include the sign in front of it. Now let's start factoring. Here, the number we can factor out is 2. And it looks like we can factor out just an x, in this case here. Now when we do that, we're left with just an x left over for this one, minus negative 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then x we factor out, we're left with a y. Next one, negative xy plus 5y squared. There's no number you can factor out except the negative. When you have a first term, and that first term is negative, and you're trying to factor, you have to factor out the negative. In this case here, for the number is negative 1, and for the variable, it looks like they both have at least one y. I'm going to factor out one y. When I factor out the y, I'm left with an x here. Positive 5 divided by negative 1 gives you negative 5y. Now, first term here, second term here, they have a binomial in common. You're doing something right. You factor out that binomial. When you factor out that binomial, you're left with 2x minus y. Again, this way is a lot easier than what they have in the book. The book, they want you to try and guess 20 times until you get the correct answer. You don't have to do that. So here's everything out for you. Watch the video again if you need more help. Have a good day.